Title: The Weight of a Second Chance. It was the call no one ever expects, the call that turned Michael's world upside down, even though he'd been expecting it for months. The news came on a late Thursday afternoon, after he'd already turned off the lights at the office. As the ringtone blared across the empty room, he thought, maybe it's just another telemarketer. But when he saw the number flash on his phone, his heart skipped a beat. Mr. Carter, this is a formal notice from the Board of Directors. Your resignation is effective immediately. He stared at the screen, frozen. His first instinct was to drop the phone, but instead, he sat motionless, letting the words sink in. The company he had spent 10 years of his life building, pouring every ounce of his energy into, had just cut him loose. The irony was not lost on him. He had been a model employee, loyal to the core, always there when they needed him. Yet here he was, with nothing left but the faint echo of his own name ringing in the silence. The truth was, Michael had been expecting this call for months. His once promising career had been on the fast track to success, until it suddenly all came crashing down. The layoffs, the shifting priorities, the never-ending pressure, it had all led to this. A decade of hard work, down the drain in a single phone call. But this wasn't the end of Michael's story. No, it was only the beginning. 3 years earlier, Michael had been living the dream. He was 34, a rising star in a prestigious marketing firm, with a house in the suburbs, a wife, and a son. Life seemed like it was on a perfect trajectory. He was the kind of guy who smiled in meetings, always had the answer, always knew what to say. But what most people didn't see was the weight he carried. His success had come at the cost of time. Time with his family, time for himself, time for his passions. Every day, he woke up at 5 a.m. to catch up on emails before heading into the office, then worked late into the night with barely a pause to eat. His son, Alex, was starting to grow up without him noticing. His wife, Emily, would often ask him to slow down, but he brushed her concerns aside. Just a few more months, he'd promise, as if the career sacrifices would somehow be worth it in the long run. But they never were. The first failure came slowly, subtle, almost imperceptible at first. It was the missed birthday parties, the vacations that were too short or too rushed, the meetings that ran late, while Emily sat alone at the dinner table with their son. Then came the fights, the quiet resentments, the feeling of distance that crept between them. Then, the inevitable happened. The company restructured. They started with layoffs, making cuts across the board, and soon enough, Michael found himself on the chopping block. In that instant, everything he thought he had built, his career, his status, his future, disappeared. The world he had worked so hard to create unraveled, leaving him with only a sense of loss. But the story doesn't end there. In the silence that followed, Michael found himself at a crossroads. He could let this be the end. He could retreat into bitterness, blaming the world for taking everything away. Or he could finally take the second chance he had been given, the chance to rebuild not just his career, but his life. He chose the latter. The first few months were tough. There was the shame of telling Emily that he didn't have a job anymore, the fear of not being able to provide for his family. But Michael wasn't the kind of person to give up. He spent long nights reflecting on what went wrong, not just in his career, but in his life. He realized he had been living for the wrong reasons. The external success, the accolades, the promotions, the titles, had never truly fulfilled him. It was the time spent with his son, teaching him to ride a bike. The quiet dinners with Emily, when they shared hopes and dreams, not just about the future, but about the present. That was what mattered. So, he made a plan. Rather than return to the corporate grind, Michael decided to do something he had always dreamed of, start his own consulting firm. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where he questioned whether he was insane to start over. He was older now, and the world had moved on. But he drew on his past experiences, his failures, his mistakes, and used them as the foundation for something new. He was no longer just building a career. He was building a life that he could be proud of. His first client was a small, struggling startup. They had a great product, but no real direction. Michael took them under his wing, applying the lessons he had learned, but this time with a different approach. He focused on relationships, on understanding people, on creating value that wasn't just about profit, but about purpose. Slowly but surely, his reputation began to grow. More clients came. Word of mouth spread. His firm